In this rich country, lots of people are poor. So what should we do about that? Spread the wealth. That's the Democrats' plan. Some Americans are plenty rich. We could just tax them more and spend the money on the poor. 50 years ago, President Johnson said America will end poverty by doing that.
This administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
He expanded Social Security to include more people, expanded the food stamp program, created job training programs, the Job Corps, Vista, Head Start, and more. And look how it's reduced poverty. In the first 10 years of the war on poverty, the poverty rate dropped from 17% to 12%. That's great success. But wait a second. Look at the years right before the war on poverty began. Americans were already lifting themselves out of poverty without the welfare programs. And now look at this graph that shows what's happened since the war began. After 5-10 years of improvement, Americans stopped making progress. The poverty rate's gone up and down. What happened? Earlier I asked Congressman Paul Ryan, what happened?
We basically decided to measure poverty based on inputs. How much money are we spending? How many programs are we creating? How many people are we putting on these programs? Not on outcomes. How many people are we getting out of poverty? We're basically managing poverty. And we're, as a result, perpetuating poverty. And so many of these programs end up disincentivizing work. They end up telling people it pays not to go to work because sometimes if you go to work, you'll lose more in benefits than you gain in going and earning
encouraging
wages.
People to be dependent.
We call it the poverty trap. You're actually, it's a realistic assumption, which is if you lose more in benefits by taking the risk of going to work and not being home and seeing kids and things like that, then the rational person says it doesn't work.
Congressman Ryan has come out with a new book titled The Way Forward, Renewing the American Idea. It expands on the anti-poverty plan he released a few months ago. So what's your way forward?
Work. Getting people from welfare to work.
Yeah,
stopping the federal.
You're implying cruelly Republicans cut them off, then they'll go to work.
We have 92 federal programs spending $800 billion a year that have gone unreformed, that are trapping people in poverty in many instances. And so what we're saying is stop this bureaucratic one-size-fits-all alphabet soup of government agencies trying to dictate this, bring resources back to communities, and focus on the individual states. Give states more flexibility, more states' rights, but most importantly, focus it on getting individuals from welfare to work and do what you need to do to help deal with people's individual problems so that they can get from welfare to work.
Impose work or job training requirements, custom aid to a person's need.
That's right.
How do you do that?
Well, look, maybe this guy needs drug counseling, and maybe he needs a GED. Maybe she needs, daycare and skills training.
And the state bureaucracy will figure this out when the feds could not?
The other proposal is break up the bureaucracy. Break it up and allow the private sector to come in and compete based upon performance about whether or not they have a better model to get people from welfare to work. So give families in need a choice of providers.
Two other points in your book. Regulatory reform to reduce barriers to entry. Meaning?
So there's two forms of this, which is you have big businesses and established interests that will come to government to protect them and erect a barrier to entry against their would-be competitors. I call that
licensing rules. And we can't just let them operate here.
That's right. We should get rid of that so we have a free economy so that everybody can come in and compete and so that we don't have crony capitalism but true free enterprise. As Republicans, we need to be a pro-market party, not just a pro-business party. The other one is...
Tear these rules down.
Tear these rules down. The other thing is a lot of these regulations hurt the poor. A lot of these regulations take more disposable income from people.
Now, the congressman has taken plenty of heat for his plan. Here's mostly from Democrats. Here's Jim McDermott from Washington State.
Paul Ryan is sitting up there smiling, but his budget that he put out cuts $137 billion out of the food stamp program. I mean, they want to seem like they care, but when you put and look at their deeds, they clearly don't care about the poor.
Cruel Republican cutting food stamps.
We've spent trillions of dollars over 50 years, and we haven't moved the needle.
But if you cut food stamps, they'll starve.
I beg to differ.
What will happen? I mean, people think they'll starve.
So, for instance, like the Obama administration removed the work requirement for food stamp recipients, for the able-bodied. What we're proposing, and what Jim is criticizing in part, is work requirements. Basically, reinstating the notion that if you're an able-bodied person and you're receiving this government assistance, taxpayers expect something in return, and we should expect something in return, such as work-related activities. Everybody has a different problem, and that's why we're saying the federal government sitting in Washington, thinking it knows how to get people out of poverty is arrogant, condescending. It doesn't work. And so what we want to do is empower local communities.
States
local
may be
groups.
Incompetent and just let people.
So break up the monopolies and have a competition so that we can experiment with ideas to focus on how do you get people out of welfare, out of poverty, into work.
Democrats say this is government's responsibility, and the best way we can do it, raise the minimum wage. And this makes sense to people.
It does make sense to people.
Republicans say we support this.
I understand that how it can make intuitive sense. The Congressional Budget Office tells us it will cost as many as 500,000 to 1 million jobs.
How?
Because it will raise the price of labor and businesses will shrink the availability of jobs. When I worked at McDonald's, when I waited tables, when I painted houses, I made minimum wage, and it was a fantastic opportunity to learn good skills in life that made me better. And by raising the minimum wage, what you end up doing is shrinking the pool of jobs that people need to get into the game in the first place.
Now, I was upset to see one of my favorite actresses promoting a higher minimum wage. Here she is playing Mary Poppins.
I'm afraid I'm leaving for good this time, children.
But why?
I'm only paid the federal minimum wage. See?
But you have magical powers.
You'd think that would entitle me to more than $7.25 an hour.
That's not the version I remembered.
But this convinces people. It just seems cruel. And people say a business isn't going to hire fewer people for an extra buck or two.
Businesses say that. The point here is not to shrink the pool of available jobs that people can get in the workforce and make a better life for themselves. A job, that is the bridge to a better life. We want more of them, not less of them.
And you
so the
argue
focus ought
that
to
the
be on
government's
getting people-
92 welfare programs shrink the number of jobs.
I think the government in many ways shrinks the number of jobs, whether it's taxes or regulations. And when you see tens of millions of people in America not having access to opportunity, and we want the government to do more damage to our economy, to make it harder for people to get
People
jobs,
think
to
government
shrink
does
the pool
good.
of jobs.